The city was dressed for glory. Flags moved in the wind above the crowded streets of Caesarea. Roman soldiers lined the palace entrance in polished armor, while nobles, merchants, and ambassadors filled the massive theater near the sea. The people had gathered for a spectacle, not a trial, not a war, a celebration. And at the center of it all stood one man, King Herod Agrippa, a ruler feared throughout Judea, a king loyal to Rome, a man who understood power, image, and fear better than most men alive. This was not an ordinary political gathering. The people were desperate for peace with the king. Their cities depended on his favor. Their survival depended on his approval. So they came prepared with praise, dangerous praise, because there are moments in history when human pride rises too high, and heaven answers immediately. Before this terrifying day arrived, Herod had already stained his reign with blood. He had begun hunting followers of Jesus, not because they threatened Rome, not because they carried weapons, but because their growing influence threatened his popularity among powerful religious leaders. So Herod made a public example out of them. The Apostle James was executed by the sword, one of the closest followers of Christ. His death sent fear through the believers across Jerusalem. But when Herod saw how much the crowds approved of the execution, his hunger for power grew even larger. Then he arrested Peter. The city watched as guards dragged the apostle through the streets in chains. Herod planned another public execution, another spectacle, another moment to increase his reputation before the people. Peter was locked inside a heavily guarded prison. Multiple squads of soldiers surrounded him day and night. Iron gates sealed every escape route. Herod believed no power on earth could interfere. But during the night, while soldiers slept beside the prisoner, a light suddenly filled the cell. An angel of God appeared. Chains fell from Peter's hands. The prison doors opened silently one after another. And before dawn, Peter had vanished from the prison without a single guard understanding what had happened. By morning, panic spread through the palace. Soldiers searched every corridor. Commanders shouted orders through the fortress. Herod was furious, humiliated. A king who claimed total control had just lost a prisoner under impossible circumstances. And somewhere beneath his royal anger, another truth was growing darker. Herod was beginning to fight against God himself. But pride blinds men before judgment arrives. Days later, the king traveled to Caesarea for a grand public ceremony. The city overflowed with visitors. Trumpets echoed through the streets. Roman officials entered the theater in procession, while servants carried banners and torches around the massive gathering place. Then, Herod appeared. Ancient historians described the robe he wore that day as covered in silver threads. Under the morning sunlight, the garment reflected light so intensely that the king almost appeared supernatural. The crowd stared in amazement. The silver robe shimmered like fire. The king stood elevated above the people, powerful, untouchable, glorious in human eyes. Then Herod began to speak. His voice echoed through the theater walls while the people listened in silence. Every word was calculated, every movement designed to inspire awe. And slowly, the atmosphere changed. The people stopped speaking to him like a king. They began speaking to him like a god. Voices rose from the crowd, then louder, then all together. They shouted that this was not the voice of a man. It was the voice of a god. And Herod accepted it. That was the moment everything changed, because there are praises that belong only to God. And when human beings steal divine glory for themselves, judgment can arrive without warning. The king stood there absorbing the worship of thousands. He did not stop them. He did not correct them. He did not humble himself before God. Instead, he enjoyed it. For one terrible moment, Herod placed himself where only God belongs. Then heaven answered. Instantly. Without battle, without rebellion, without assassination. The judgment came from God alone. An angel struck the king, not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically. Suddenly, the powerful ruler who stood glowing before the crowd began collapsing under invisible terror. The atmosphere in the theater shifted from celebration to horror. People screamed. Officials rushed toward the throne. The king's body twisted in agony before the stunned audience. The man they had praised as divine was now helpless before death. Ancient records describe the suffering as horrifying. The king was consumed from within. The judgment did not happen secretly inside a palace chamber. It happened publicly, before the same crowd that had worshipped him moments earlier. The same lips that shouted praises now watched in fear as the king deteriorated before their eyes. Because God had answered publicly, the silver robe could not save him. Roman power could not save him. Royal authority could not save him. Human worship could not save him. A man who accepted glory meant for God discovered how fragile human power truly is. And then came the final humiliation. The king, who once appeared radiant before the nation, was eaten from within by corruption and disease, until death finally overtook him. The crowd dispersed in terror. The celebration ended in silence. The throne remained. But the king was gone. History remembers many rulers who demanded worship: pharaohs, emperors, kings, tyrants, men who believed power made them untouchable. But the story of Herod stands as a warning written across Scripture itself. God is patient, but pride can bring sudden destruction, especially when a man begins taking the glory that belongs to heaven alone. The terrifying part is not simply that Herod died. Everyone dies. The terrifying part is how quickly the judgment came after the worship. Seconds earlier, the crowd celebrated him. Seconds later, the same crowd watched him collapse beneath divine judgment. That is how fragile human greatness truly is. One breath away from eternity. One moment away from standing before the God whose glory cannot be shared. And while kings rise and fall across history, one truth remains unchanged. No throne stands above God. No ruler escapes his authority. No human being can wear divine glory without consequence. The crowds in Caesarea learned that in one horrifying afternoon. The apostles learned it. The Roman officials learned it. And history never forgot it. Because the king who allowed himself to be worshipped like a god was dead moments later.